I disowned my adoptive son since he chose his people over us. We adopted Jalen when he was 8. His birth mom was my younger sister who overdosed when he was 6, and his dad was nowhere to be found. I was 32 at the time with no kids of my own, and my husband Mike was completely on board. We figured we'd give Jalen the stable home he deserved after bouncing between foster homes for 2 years. Jalen was this quiet, serious kid who'd seen way too much for his age. He'd flinch whenever we raised our voices, even if we were just calling him for dinner from the other room. It took months before he'd laugh at my terrible dad jokes, or let us hug him without going stiff. But slowly, he started opening up. He'd help Mike in the garage on weekends, ask me to pack extra snacks for school, started calling us mom and dad around his 10th birthday. For years, everything was perfect. Jalen made good grades, played baseball in middle school, had friends over for sleepovers. We never hid his adoption from him, but he seemed completely settled with us. When he turned 16, I taught him to drive in our old Honda Civic. Mike took him fishing every summer. We were a real family. But then his senior year, something changed. Jalen started asking more questions about his birth family, where they lived, if he had any siblings, what happened to his dad. I tried to be honest but gentle, telling him what little I knew. His birth mom had struggled with addiction, bounced around a lot, made poor choices. His dad had left when Jalen was 3 and never came back. One day in February, Jalen came home from school acting weird. He kept checking his phone during dinner and barely touched his food. When I asked what was wrong, he said some guy named Carlos had messaged him on Instagram claiming to be his older half-brother. My stomach dropped. I knew Carlos existed, but had hoped he'd never surface. Carlos was 19, lived about 3 hours away, and according to Jalen, wanted to meet up. I told Jalen absolutely not without knowing more about this kid first. Carlos came from the same messy situation Jalen had been rescued from. I didn't want that chaos dragging my son back down. But Jalen got defensive. He said I was being controlling, and that Carlos was his real family. That stung, but I tried to stay calm. I explained that we just wanted to protect him, that we'd figure out a safe way to meet Carlos if that's what he really wanted. 2 weeks later, Jalen lied and said he was staying at his friend Nathan's house overnight. Instead, he drove 3 hours to meet Carlos and stayed the whole weekend. When he came back Sunday night, he was different, distant. Started talking about how Carlos understood him in ways we never could. How Carlos knew what it was like to grow up poor and unwanted. That's when Carlos started calling our house. He'd sweet-talk Jalen into driving down there every other weekend. When I'd try to set boundaries, Jalen would explode, screaming about how I wasn't his real mom and couldn't tell him what to do. Mike and I tried family counseling, but Jalen just sat there silent or walked out mid-session. The final blow came in May, right before graduation. Jalen announced he wasn't going to college after all. Instead, he was moving in with Carlos and getting a job at some warehouse. All our plans, all the money we'd saved for his education, all the college visits we'd done junior year, none of it mattered anymore. Carlos had convinced him that college was a waste of time for people like them. I begged Jalen to reconsider, reminded him of everything we'd built together, all the dreams we'd talked about for his future, but he just shook his head and said Carlos was teaching him about his real culture, his real family history. He said we'd never understand, because we weren't really his people. The night before graduation, Jalen packed his bags. I stood in his doorway watching him stuff 10 years of our life together into 2 duffel bags, his baseball trophies, the photo from our trip to Yellowstone, his favorite hoodie I'd bought him for Christmas, all of it getting shoved in like it meant nothing. When he finished packing, he turned to me and said thanks for everything, but he needed to be with his real family now. I asked him what that made us, and he just shrugged, said we were good people who helped him out for a while, but blood was thicker than water. I told him if he walked out that door to chase after people who'd abandoned him once before, he shouldn't bother coming back. I said we'd loved him like our own son for 10 years, but if that wasn't real enough for him, then maybe he was right. Maybe we weren't his people after all. Jalen left that night, didn't even stay for his own graduation ceremony. That was 3 months ago. Carlos got arrested for selling drugs 2 weeks after Jalen moved in with him.